You have at most 3 days. That's it. That's the entire window between you and total organ failure. 3 days without water, and your body starts shutting down systems one by one, like a building going dark floor by floor. And for 299,000 of the 300,000 years our species has existed, drinking the wrong thing on the wrong day could kill you just as fast as drinking nothing at all. We don't think about this. Why would we? You turn a handle, water appears clean, cold. Safe, zero conscious thought required. But that ease you feel right now, that's an illusion built on top of one of the deadliest, most overlooked problems in human history. And the way our ancestors solved it is so strange, so dark and so quietly brilliant that once you understand it, you'll never look at a glass of water the same way again. Here's where it starts. Not with water, with the absence of it. Picture a river in the ancient world, not the river in your head. The postcard version, blue and glittering, the real one. Animal carcasses rotting at the edges, a predator that died upstream last week, slowly dissolving into the current. Birds using the shallows as a toilet, generation after generation, for centuries. Every sip from that river was a gamble. Sometimes you survived, sometimes your insides turned against you and didn't stop. Dysentery wasn't a footnote in ancient life. It was a leading cause of death, quiet, common and almost completely invisible until it was too late. And here's the part that should unsettle you. The water that looked the cleanest was often the most dangerous. Crystal clarity tells you nothing about what's actually living inside it. Our ancestors had no microscopes, no germ theory, no way to see the threat. They just had bodies that got sick, bodies that didn't. And slowly, generation after generation, they started noticing the pattern. They began avoiding stagnant water, favoring springs over rivers, something underground, surfacing fresh, hadn't yet been touched by everything sitting on top of the world. That's not luck. That's hundreds of thousands of years of trial and fatal error, compressed into instinct. But pattern recognition only gets you so far when the enemy is invisible. And that's when something happened that changed the entire trajectory of civilization. Nobody planned it. Nobody understood why it worked. Someone left grain and water sitting too long in the wrong conditions and came back to find it transformed into something else entirely. Beer, not the beer you're picturing. Thick, lumpy, sipped through a reed straw just to filter out the floating debris. It looked more like a strange alcoholic porridge than a drink. And here is the unsettling brilliance hiding underneath that ugly surface. Fermentation kills pathogens. The process that made it taste strange is the exact same process that made it safe. The tribe that figured this out by accident gained something the tribe next door didn't have: survival. More children who lived long enough to learn the recipe. This is where it stops being about taste and starts being about evolution itself. In ancient Mesopotamia, over 5,000 years ago, there are written ration records. Workers building the great temples weren't just paid in food. They were paid in beer, daily, not a reward. A requirement. There's a Sumerian hymn written as a prayer that is essentially a brewing recipe addressed to a goddess. Think about that for a second. They didn't just rely on this liquid to survive, they worshipped it. When something keeps you alive long enough, the human mind doesn't just use it, it deifies it. The Egyptians ran on the exact same hidden logic. The workers who built the pyramids, the actual pyramids, were partly fueled by beer rations. Watered down, even given to children, because the alternative, untreated water, was the greater risk. Let that sit with you. Parents handing their children a mildly alcoholic drink, not out of carelessness, but out of love. Out of the only kind of safety they understood how to give, but that wasn't the only solution. And this is where it gets stranger. In Greece and Rome, wine almost never touched human lips undiluted. Drinking it straight was considered something close to barbaric, a social red flag. Wine was mixed with water, 2 or 3 parts water to 1 part wine, in a shared vessel at the center of the table. It looked like civility. It looked like culture. It was actually a public health intervention, disguised as etiquette, and nobody at the table knew it. Roman soldiers carried something called posca, vinegar, mixed with water, sour, unpleasant, reliable. An army that doesn't get crippled by waterborne illness while marching through unfamiliar territory has an advantage no enemy can fight directly. Some historians believe this sour, forgettable drink quietly helped hold together one of the largest empires in human history. And here's where the story splits into something almost eerie. Because completely separated by ocean, language, and thousands of years with zero contact, other civilizations arrived at the exact same conclusion through their own trial and error. On the Eurasian steppe, nomads were fermenting horse milk into something called kumis. fueling the armies of Genghis Khan across a continent. In the Andes, the Inca were brewing chicha from maize, used as currency, used in ceremony, used to power the labor that built an empire. But here's the detail that makes most people stop breathing for a second. The traditional method involved chewing the maize first, then spitting it into a container to ferment, because human saliva contains an enzyme that breaks down the starch into sugar yeast can use. They had no concept of enzymes, they just knew, empirically, that this disgusting process kept their people alive. Mesopotamia, Egypt, the steppe, the Andes, different continents, different centuries, different ingredients entirely, all independently discovering the same hidden truth. Fermentation is survival. That's not coincidence anymore. That's something deeper. That's the human mind, under threat of death, converging on the same answer again and again. The truth was always there, waiting to be found by anyone desperate enough to look. And then there's tea. China, thousands of years ago. The mechanism is almost embarrassingly simple. To drink tea, you must first boil water. Boiling kills what you cannot see. An entire civilization built one of the most elaborate, beautiful rituals in human history, the tea ceremony, layered in philosophy and art and silence around a single, brutally practical act, heating water until it stops being a threat, wrapped in silk, built on survival. So everywhere you look, humanity solved the same invisible war in a different costume. Religion, ritual, currency, etiquette. All of it, quietly, secretly, a defense mechanism against something they couldn't see, couldn't name, and couldn't stop except by accident. So let's pull back, all the way back. For nearly the entire existence of our species, the simple act of staying hydrated was a daily confrontation with death. It shaped where people settled, what they farmed, what they worshipped, who lived long enough to have children and who didn't. Every culture, every continent, facing the exact same invisible enemy and answering it with whatever tools desperation could invent. Fermentation, boiling, dilution, ritual, religion. None of it scientific. All of it earned through bodies that didn't survive long enough to tell anyone what went wrong. And now, you turn a handle, and the entire problem disappears in 3 seconds, with zero thought given to the hundreds of thousands of years it took to get here. But maybe that's the real unsettling part of this story, not what they drank, what we've forgotten. Because the moment a species solves a problem completely, it stops looking like a problem at all. It just becomes invisible, background, assumed. And somewhere right now, in this exact moment, hundreds of millions of people are still living in the part of this story that hasn't ended yet. We didn't escape the problem. We just got lucky enough to forget it exists.